Welcome to Biztech Technology Show, the show where we feature tech companies operating globally, talking about their solutions and how they make a difference to their customers' businesses. Today, we speak to Tamer Hassan, co-founder and CEO of Human Security. Human Security, formerly known as White Ops, is a cybersecurity company that protects enterprises and internet platforms from sophisticated bot attacks and fraud to keep digital experiences human. Now, welcome to the show, Tamer.
Thank you, Brian. Very glad to be here.
Now, Tamer, could you give us an overview of Human and its history?
Sure. We started about 10 years ago. The statement of purpose of the company is to protect the integrity of the internet. What we do, we're a cybersecurity company. We protect enterprises from fraud, abuse, and digital attacks. This is all built on our core platform, the Human Defense Platform, built on principles of modern defense theory and the visibility of over 15 trillion interactions per week on over 3 billion unique devices per month. We use all of this to protect our enterprises and essentially enabling a layer of collective protection across the ecosystem.
Now, Tamer, you have a fascinating background. You were in the military before, and then you transitioned into now cybersecurity. Could you give us some insights into your background?
Sure. Yeah, it was a very unique route that had often unexpected detours for me. At a heart, am a builder. Both my parents were architects, and I wanted to design and engineer things. So when I joined the Air Force, I actually joined to be an engineer. And my early years in the Air Force were at the U.S. Air Force Academy in the United States, studying engineering. And what happened, my last couple of years at the Air Force Academy was 9/11, and they had given me the opportunity to fly and to go into aviation. Prior to that, I decided to stick with engineering, but after that, at that age, my mindset was, well, I'll go fly the things, and then I'll be a better engineer for them on the other side. So I took this detour into aviation for several years, and the first
and you were
few years,
both a fixed wing qualified and a rotor qualified pilot, weren't you?
That's right. I flew a handful of different airframes, fixed wing, and ultimately ended up in the Air Force Pavehawk. It's a modified version of the Black Hawk for search and rescue, where I spent most of my career.
And so with that detour, then what inspired you to set up Human?
Yeah, so ultimately, I wanted to get back to building things. I always had a love for technology, and I always had a capability in software development ever since I was a child. And so when I moved into the reserve from the Air Force, I was still serving the U.S. Air Force as a reservist, but went back into the private sector. I went back into data and software development, and essentially started my own companies in that area. And one of my projects was examining a set of data for fraud, and that turned out to be a bot problem, which is what kicked off White Ops at the time. As we dug deeper, we started to pull the strings on a significant fraud operation, only to realize how much bot activity there is on the internet that nobody really realized. So we launched, in 2012. With a new approach to bot detection, and have been going ever since.
Okay, so walk us through some of the use cases as to how you help your customers.
Yeah, it's one of the most interesting problems I've ever gotten to work on. We see bots designed to do just about everything you can think of, from e-commerce fraud, in baking, account takeover, and credential stuffing as the primary attack. All the way to fraud in advertising and media, engaging on websites to change popularity. In e-commerce, we see sniping and scalping of goods, scraping of sensitive data. Not a lot of people realize that the Snowden breach on the NSA was actually a bot written to crawl internally. That's an example of data scraping. We've even detected and discovered bots designed to listen to music on streaming media platforms, because there is an incentive and incredible value into making something more popular. And so there's a variety of mechanisms. There's bot activity that you can buy and sell on the internet to do just about any human interaction. So most often this all leads to some sort of fraud and abuse or market manipulation. And those are the fundamental use cases that we get pulled into.
And I suppose then what some of the scary applications of this is also bots influencing policy and also voting.
That's right. The heart of the problem, when you pull it apart, is what can you do if you can look like a million humans? And the answer is a lot of things. I mean, an example of what you're talking about, in the US, we had the technology vote for the net neutrality policy a few years back, one of the most important policies of our generation. And what was uncovered was a large scale bot operation manipulating the public comment portal for the policy. They actually had to call a delay in the vote because of uncovering this. And that was, for us, it was an alarming thing to see because it was a bot that was caught, and it was a fairly simple bot, but it was the first moment where I think everybody started thinking, well, what are the ones we're not seeing? What are the ones we haven't caught yet?
Now, you talk about, as I was doing this research for this interview, I came across the fascinating story of your MetaBot trial, and which led to the sentencing of Alexander Zhukov. Could you give us some insights into this fascinating story?
Sure. That was a journey for us. We uncovered a large-scale bot operation several years back. It was very small when it started, and it grew over time. Essentially grew to almost 2 million infections on users across the globe. And those infections, those bots, were used to do a number of fraud activities, mostly in advertising and media. And as we started to pick up on its aggressiveness, it was a very adaptive bot. We put together a collaborative group across private sector companies and governments. In the end, it was 30 companies and 6 governments that were involved supporting law enforcement that led to the indictments of 8 Russian cyber criminals. 4 of them were extradited to the US, and 3 of them pled guilty. 1 of them went to trial where we stood as a witness. And ultimately that trial concluded a few months ago with the sentencing of Zhukov for 10 years and across a variety of counts. It was significant in a lot of ways. It was one of the largest bot operations and most sophisticated we'd seen at that time. It ran like a technology company. There were several groups. They had sprint cycles like professional engineers. They were running on professional engineering software. Their code was beautifully structured and commented. All of it, it might as well have been in the Valley for all intents and purposes. And it was also one of the largest private sector collaborations with law enforcement in the US government in history. 30 private sector companies that we led and pulled together around this. And it highlighted the effectiveness of collaborating both as companies in the private sector and also with law enforcement. And there were 6 governments involved as well. All of that, from the time we uncovered it to the time they were extradited and brought to the US and put behind bars, was less than 24 months, when it should have really taken 5 to 7 years by normal standards. So it was a very historic case by a lot of means.
So Tamer, that's, as you said, a historic case, but essentially of the millions of cases like this, very few actually come to trial and prosecution, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. And that's the importance of what we're doing. We've built a platform we call the Human Defense Platform. And it's built on the ideas of modern defense theory, going beyond blocking, beyond detection, sometimes into offense, sometimes into disruption, sometimes into mechanisms like deception and misinformation back at bad actors, right? The entire idea of the platform is to change the economics of cybercrime, to raise the cost of every attack, lower the cost of collective defense. That's where the security game is really won and lost.
And so that's unique to you, isn't it? That's one of your unique selling propositions then as your product.
That's right. We built our company around this DNA, but not just from a people and process perspective, but in the technology. And, I learned a stark lesson early on in my military career, well before I ever got to war. And it was in a classroom at the Air Force Academy. And the instructor said to us, and I never forgot it, was, if you're ever going into a battle to fight a fair fight, turn around. That's not the kind of fight you want to fight, right? And it doesn't mean we should break laws, but it does mean we should do everything to tip it to our advantage, right?
Yeah,
when
so
we
you
all
must
go to
have you want to battle, you must have the unfair advantage. So when you're going to battle, I think the doctrine is 3-to-1 advantage, right? If you're attacking.
Right, exactly. And unfortunately, in modern security now, in a defensive security posture, the odds are tipped against us. It is more difficult to be on defense defending 1,000 attacks than to be on offense. And it's like when we go to Vegas. The one thing we all know, if we go to Las Vegas, they have a 1% advantage, is that if we play long enough, we will lose, right? Those are the odds, and all they need is a 1% advantage. And that's the game that security is playing right now. And so we have to change that. And that's what modern defense is about. It's about going beyond. It's why we did the disruption. It's why we supported a law enforcement case. It's why we do all the things we do, essentially to change the cost of the attack, raise the cost for the attackers, lower the cost for all the defenders. That's the real game that's played in security.
Now, Tamer, I want to bring you now to the Asia Pacific region. Give us a perspective of your footprint in the region and what's been your go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a global company. We have customers in every region. We have people in APAC, in Singapore, actually. And just this last year, we closed a round of funding in January last month. And a part of that is to further expansion into EMEA and APAC, and to build on our footprint there. But we are processing over 15 trillion interactions per month, and that is global. We see activity from all over the region there, and we have customers that are also global and based out of there.
And Tamer, which are the key sectors and markets that you've seen the best adoption in the Asia Pacific region for your products?
Yeah, it's the bot problem spans a full spectrum, but the most common one across markets is media. So websites, protecting advertising, and then it gets into e-commerce. That's the other aspect, and social. Those are a few verticals. One of our fastest growing verticals is finance. We haven't penetrated, I'd say, the fintech market that's emerging in APAC, but that's a part of our expansion.
And what are some of the key trends that you see in 2022 in terms of cybersecurity?
Yeah, so one surprising metric that we uncovered in our data is that over 77% of security incidents are done by bots. They have a bot used somewhere in the attack cycle, over 77%. And when you step back and look at that, what you're seeing is a modern attack tool for attackers. If you're not using a bot, you're kind of out of date. Why would you not automate something with 1 million machines instead of doing it with a few people? And so what we're seeing is that it's growing in sophistication. It used to be that it's easy to pick up on these bots. More and more, they're looking human. And what that ultimately means is that they're coming from our own machines. Over 50% of the bots we see come from our own devices that are infected. So it might be your laptop. It could be my daughter's iPad that I didn't police well enough, right? And it's running in the background. And I think we'll start to see a lot more of that, especially as companies come online with COVID and the rapid expansion of digital storefronts and surface areas for customers and employees. We're seeing more and more surfaces open up.
Now, Tamer, I want to now zoom in a little bit on you. You've grown a company to a point where, and this is, you started companies earlier in your life as well, and you've just raised $100 million, I think, in growth funding in January, right?
That's right.
What are some of the key lessons that you've learned in your entrepreneurship journey?
Oh, there's been many, but nothing more important than people. Building around the right team is the most important thing. And I was always struck by a quote I heard from Steven Spielberg in an interview. Somebody asked them, "How do you do it? How do you do blockbuster after blockbuster?" And his answer was essentially, when you have a good script, after that, it's all about casting. You cast the right people, that's 90% of it. And it's the same thing in business. It's the same thing. It's a different group of people at different phases, but it also applies to investors and who you take your money from. Every dollar is not always the same. It depends on your strategy and your company. And so taking that lens, even to the investment mindset of, hey, we're adding somebody to our team, and how does that complement the rest of the team? And is this the right person you want, on the team? All of that was, I'd say, at the heart of our success over the last 10 years.
And what are the three things perhaps that you would have done differently?
Oh, wow. There's a lot more than three.
Well, you can share that with us. I mean, we're here to learn.
Most startups fail from having too much to do and trying to do too much. And I think when you don't fail from that, often you don't learn quickly enough. So I think 0 to 1, laser focus, and actually being strong in a very specific use case before expanding is incredibly important, and it saves actually more time than you think you'll get by expanding early. That's a major use case. The other thing I've learned is that a company needs different things, a different architecture, a different operating system, different people at different sizes. At 25 million in revenue is much different than 100 million, much different than what it'll be at 200 million in revenue. And you have to be ready to evolve and change the game, especially when you're growing rapidly. And that's a part of it. And
so how do you manage that? And I got to interrupt you here, because that's something that successful entrepreneurs like you have said time and time again, entrepreneurs who have scaled their businesses through several stages. Managing that transition is very difficult, isn't it? Because you've built the company to a certain stage with a core group of people, and then their skill sets are probably not ready for that next leap, and you've got to bring in different people. How do you manage that?
Yeah, with a lot of I'd say humanity and dignity and candor, right? I think that's important. Ultimately, I have an obligation not just to the teams around me, but also to shareholders and to the benefit of the whole company. And so, everything is about, you try to get somebody in their best mode. And sometimes that means changing roles. Sometimes that means you've walked a journey together for so long, and might be time to say, hey, that was awesome. Thank you. And we have to move on. And that can be a painful part of it, but it can also be a celebration, right? And people go on to do greater and greater things. I've been so, often excited. Somebody's been with us for 4 or 5 years, and now they're going on to do a bigger role, something that they never would have done before being a part of the company. So I think it's finding the best in it, and really getting to know people's talents and their capabilities matters just as much when you're figuring out it might not be a fit for a role as it might be great for a new initiative or something else, right?
And what else do you think you would have done differently?
Yeah, it's hard to say. There's not much. There are so many challenges along the way, and sometimes mistakes, that created aspects of the company and resilience in the company that made us what we are. And I'm, very grateful for that journey, for the teams, for the investors that backed us and still back us today.
Now, Tamer, it's been a fascinating conversation. But before we leave, any thoughts that you'd like to leave us with before we end the conversation?
Yeah, security is evolving, and bots are one of the most important problems in modern security. But the challenges we face, is that we're not playing the game right. We're playing a losing game in security. We're playing defense, and until we evolve to modern defense and go beyond detection and blocking, we're going to be playing a game to lose and to minimize losses instead of a strategy to win the overarching security challenges that face all companies today. And that's going to become more and more important, collective protection across companies, all the way to policy making and making sure that it's informed. The success of security in the next decade will be based on modern defense theory.
Tamer, it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Thank you, Brian. It's been great to speak with you. Have a good night.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and we've been speaking to Tamer Hassan, the co-founder and CEO of Human Security, on Biztech Technology Show. This video and podcast will be on our various platforms as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please like and subscribe to our website and various platforms. Thanks a lot for tuning in.